A Royal Feast short by me, C, the one who loves the drama. Hello people, lovely to see you once again. This is not a recap of Royal Feast, but another short detailed video. I explained what these were and what they entail in the first one I made, so I'm not going to go back over that. And I know we're all very eager for me to move forward to episode 8, but I have a long way to go to catch up on these short videos, so I thought maybe better to address some of those issues before moving forward and creating even more of a deficit. So be prepared for a whole series of these as well. So let's get into it. This short episode is addressing a comment that responded with an answer to a question I made in the first recap video that I created. I did figure out how to add links for my previous videos, so I am going to include one for recap episode 1 here. But in that video, if you'll recall, the Emperor suddenly comes back to the Forbidden City after being out doing Emperor fighty war type stuff, and it is on the same day as the Changyang festival. Please excuse me, because I know I did not pronounce that the way I should have. At that particular festival, there is a combination and a collection of palace officials. Some were wearing red, some were wearing blue, and I, at the time, did not understand the distinction and why that change was made. I had a commenter, Sexually Active Toyota Prius 3454. Excellent name, by the way. I don't know what that refers to, but it's a name you don't forget once you've heard it, who was gracious enough to respond to that question about why the distinction in colors, and they gave an answer that was so obvious I almost feel stupid for asking the question in the first place. I am going to attach this part of the comment here, and I'm going to go ahead and read it for you at the same time. As to why the male officials at the feast are wearing red and some are wearing blue, I believe that's because they're grouped by seniority. The guys in the red would be older / more senior / powerful officials with greater duties, which is why they're closest to the emperor. The guys in blue would be less powerful officials, maybe younger guys, or just guys from poorer families who don't have the connections to get the greater positions and the red robes. Now, once I read that comment, it made so much sense to me. I asked this question probably when I'd seen the entire series maybe 2 or 3 times. Now I've seen it probably like 20, 30, 40 times. And it's obvious to me now in a way that wasn't obvious to me when I made recap episode 1, that the distinction in colors clearly signifies a distinction in power, position, and authority. Amongst the servants who work in the Forbidden City, that is something that plays through not just through the official's dress, but also in the outfits that are worn by the eunuchs, as well as the female maids and officials in the palace. And so this is a perfect time to address some of those distinctions. I'm going to go ahead and not talk about the women at this stage. I'm going to talk specifically about male servants and their attire and what's signified by the colors and the accessories that they wear, and I will save what the women and female official attire differences signify for a later short video in the hopes of actually keeping this short. If we're talking about the highest level of status in the Forbidden City and what those men wear, we are of course going to have to talk about the men who make up the royal family. I can't go too deeply into detail about their actual clothing because it's a little difficult for me at least to figure out what those distinctions are in this story, but it is clear that there is a distinction in the level of hats that they wear. Of course, the very top level that you see is the emperor. He wears a hat that has rounded proportions. There are some external parts on the back that are pointed up, and he has a very distinct golden motif that is attached over the top of that. Nobody else in the entire story wears that except other men who later on become the emperor. Now, I do have one question here. You will notice that all of the other men in the family, both the second, third prince as well as the crown prince and Wan Tai-soon, wear the same type of hat as the emperor minus the embellishments. But the Prince of Han has an additional accessory that is made of gold attached to his hat. That is confusing to me because the Prince of Han is not the crown prince. He is not Taizi. So I'm not sure why he has that extra element as a part of his accessories and attire when the crown prince, his oldest brother, his Dachi, does not have it. So if anybody knows why that's the case, other than perhaps him being the favorite and his father liking him and allowing him to wear it even though he's not entitled to do so, please go ahead and let me know in the comments, and of course I will make it known when you give me an answer that makes sense. So outside of, like I said, the hat wear of the royal men, there's really no clear distinction about why any one of them wear the colors that they wear. Throughout the stories, they wear similar forms, functions, and colors of attire, so we're going to leave them where they're at. The next stage that you get are amongst the servants, and there seems to be a distinction between the officials, the eunuchs that serve in the palace, and the security guard. Amongst all three of those categories, the highest seeming level of all three categories are entitled to wear red. You see this demonstrated by the eunuchs who are closest to the highest level ranking male members of the family. I'm going to attach pictures of the two that come to mind at this moment. You also notice that Yu Fan, who is obviously of high rank amongst the security guard class, he wears red, whereas none of the rest of his staff do. And then there is also the example of various eunuchs who work in the palace, who head various departments that handle palace matters. After the people who are entitled to wear red, it seems like the next most important status are people who wear green. If we're talking about eunuchs and servants, you're going to see that Chun Wu and Young Chi both wear a dark green uniform at this point in time. I think that that's because even though they are Wan Tai-soon's highest ranking servants, Wan Tai-soon himself is sort of the third generation, third in line of importance of the royal family male members, and so his servants are not entitled at this point to wear red. They wear the green instead. We do not see the servants that specifically assist the Prince of Han or the third prince in this case, so we don't know and can't fully establish that. But the second level male servant eunuchs seem to wear dark green, a lovely emerald green, if you will. And it seems that after you get through that, you have the servants who are entitled to wear blue. So Yu Fan's employees, the people who back him up, they seem to wear a sort of purplish blue uniform. And then you also see that the eunuchs who work in the palace, who are usually responsible for sort of the more physical labor, the ones who are standing outside of doors, the ones who tend to carry things around and don't get names, don't get titles, aren't seen as important, they are also wearing a blue, although it is a lovely cobalt blue indeed. I will say that there is a distinction amongst the hats here that don't necessarily make sense. So when you're talking about the high level officials and the eunuchs who work as sort of the important members of various palace departments, they wear hats that have these side pieces. They seem a little bit larger than the ones that are worn by the men of the royal family. And whereas the men of the royal family, the back pieces of their head pieces are up, all of these servants have them out to the side. Whereas if you're a mid-level member, it seems like although you get to wear the rounded hat, that hat is not or does not have the extra pieces in the back attached at all. They just don't apply there, and you see that in UYFAN and in the various people who work in security. When it comes to the lower level male eunuchs and male servants, they have hats that tend to be more square. Once again, there's a distinction there. If you're a higher level, low ranking eunuch, you have a square hat that has a different presentation than the ones that are worn by the gentlemen who also wear the cobalt blue. I'm gonna go ahead and just put pictures up because it's almost impossible to explain this with mere words. You need to see it to make the difference. But I think what's most important here is to recognize that there is a distinction in clothing and in accessories amongst all of the people who work in the palace, so that anyone who walks into the palace automatically knows who you are and what your status is based on your attire alone. And that is something that I truly think is useful, and it completely explains why in that first episode some of those gentlemen are wearing red and some of those gentlemen are wearing blue. It's a clear distinction amongst power rankings, power levels, power abilities. So that's all I have for this particular short video. When we get a little further along, I will do the same sort of breakdown of the female servants and female maids attire within the palace as well. But for now, this was everything that I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much, Sexually Active Toyota Prius 3454, for answering the question that I made. And I want to encourage anybody else who is watching these videos who does have an answer or a comment to make to please include that in the comments below. I will read them, I will respond to them, and I will make sure to include them in future videos because it's awesome, and that's the type of community and relationship that I am trying to encourage on this channel. That's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. I have many more shorts to come. Some of them will actually be short, but for the meantime, I hope that everything is going amazing with you, and I am here and dipping and dapping and doing it the very best that I can. See you next time.